Hello, everyone. My name is Marty Evans, and I'm a member of the tax aid team who is thrilled to talk to you today about taxes. For some people, taxes are scary. For some, they're confusing. And for others, they're just something you never even deal with or think about. Well, the goal at the end of this session is for you to feel a lot more comfortable with the subject and with what taxes and tax documents mean for you. So with that being said, let's dive right in. A quick disclaimer. This summary is going to provide basic information about your hiring paperwork. So these are the forms that go through how much withholding you need, such as W-4, and in California, the EDD DE-4, as well as some pay stub information. But if you'd like any more deeper dives, additional information can be found online at taxaid.org. Plenty of resources there. Encourage you to check it out. And a little more about TaxAid. Who is TaxAid? What is TaxAid? Well, it's a nonprofit 501c3, which is an officially registered nonprofit organization that was founded back in 1988 and year in, year out, week in, week out, works to help families and individuals with incomes most recently under $58,000 by preparing their income tax returns for free and then educating them about tax credits and benefits and things that they can take advantage of to make sure that they're as well prepared and well equipped as possible each year. And so just this most recent tax season in 2022, TaxAid volunteers helped over 1,000 individuals in the Bay Area receive over $1.5 million in tax refunds. Furthermore, ever since 2020, that illustrious year, TaxAid has been hosting Myeep interns. So it's a program that has deep roots with the Myeep program, and that's why we're excited to further that connection today. So the agenda of what I'm going to discuss with you is with your onboarding paperwork, what do you do with your W-2? How do you handle that? And then with the CA EDD DE-4 document, what is required for you to fill out? And then finally, questions that you might have, we'll address a few of those. So one important detail is a big one, which is don't panic. Don't freak out. You've just been handed a stack of documents, all of these forms, all of these codes. How do you fill them out? It could be overwhelming, but I encourage you, if you trust me, don't panic. That's the most important thing. If you read over everything, and in this guide, we're going to walk you through it, it'll be a lot less stressful by the end of this session. So let's start off with the Form W-4. Well, first of all, why do you need to fill out a Form W-4? Well, the purpose of this form is to help your employer determine how much should be taken out of your paycheck to cover your taxes. So as you earn wages, the federal government and the state government, they need to have taxes paid. This is, of course, how we pay for streets, how we pay for our firefighters, how we pay for schools. So everyone's got to pay their share, and how much they need to withhold in order to make sure you have enough withheld is based on this form. So this is basically like an instruction manual of this is how much I should have withheld, and the outcome of this form is what's going to be reflected on your pay stub. And so ultimately at the end of the year, when you receive your Form W-2, which is the formal summary of all of the wages that you earned, taxes that were withheld, taxes that were paid. So this is an input. It's like instructions on what to do, and your W-2 at the end of the year is a summary of what all happened. So the first step, step one, if you go to the top, you see is just to enter your personal information. So this is your name, your address, your social security number, and your filing status. So with step one, where you're entering that personal information, just remember at the end when you're choosing filing status, for most students, you simply check single. So that, of course, if you have exceptions, as I said, on the TaxAid website, you can dig in a little deeper to see what you need. But for by and large, most people watching this video, single is going to be what you pick. Now, step 2, which says multiple jobs. And if you have a spouse that works, if you have a second job, then checkbox 2C is going to apply to you, but that's only if you have a second job. Now, moving on down to steps 3 through 4, and it's pretty readable. Just read through each line. You can see why we're skipping through. Most things won't apply to many people. So for steps 3 through 4, that won't apply to most students, but if you put 0, then more will be withheld from your pay for taxes than if you put 1. So if you want to be more conservative, then you put 0. If you put 1, then a little bit less is paid out to fulfill that tax requirement that you have. And the more allowances that you claim on this form, so the more that you put in that allowances section, the more that you receive in your take-home pay. But you don't want to end up having not enough taxes paid to the government. So how it works is you earn wages, a certain amount gets withheld out of your paycheck and sent to the government, and you get the remainder. You just want to make sure what's sent to the government is sufficient. So as I said, most people can skip to step 5. And in this setup where you're looking for, if you have a second job, then you can use the IRS estimator, and that's included on the IRS's website. It's just under the IRS's website, go to tax and withholding estimator if you have another job. So when you're filling out these forms, W-4, just keep in mind for the job where you make the most money, claim all of the allowances that you normally would on the W-4 form. For any other job, you'll want to claim 0. So if you have 2 jobs, one job that pays the most money and then another like side small job, for that first job, that big one, you'll want to include all the allowances that you normally would, which might be 1, might be 0. And then for every other job, just choose 0 so that you make sure enough is being withheld. And so what are extra withholdings that you see on this form? Extra withholdings, that pertains to additional amounts that you can request to have withheld from your paycheck. So it's like you can say, hey, I think I'm actually going to need even more taken out from my check to pay my tax bill than you're withholding already. Here's that extra amount I want you to withhold and send to the government on my behalf. So extra withholdings are typically used by people who owe taxes at the end of the year and wish to have that bill prepaid so they don't end up owing or end up with a penalty. So just a recap of W-4, it's instructions on what to withhold. For most people, it's pretty straightforward. And now, the same way we have to pay our federal taxes, we have to pay our California taxes. And so what is form CAEDD-DE4? Well, it's for California personal income tax withholding purposes only. So the CAEDD-DE4 is used to compute the amount of taxes your employer will withhold from your wages to accurately reflect your tax withholding obligation for the state of California. This form is the California version of the form that we saw on the last screen, the form W-4. So you have to fill out this form additionally, because in additional to those federal state taxes, which you can think of are paying for things like all of the federal services, like the TSA when you go to the airport, for our military, for all of the things that the whole country needs to fund. That's where your federal taxes are going. And then for your state taxes, so this is where we go into schools and we go into highways and hospitals, things like that. The state of California has an income tax to help pay for those things. So on this document, you're going to read through and you're just going to fill out all the information that you would. So you'll start off with your personal information, your name, your address, your social security number, and again, that filing status, which for most all students is going to just be single. So you'll fill out steps 1 through 4. Now, what does a 0 mean? Well, a 0 here for the total number of allowances, that means you want, on line 5, that means that you want the most amount of tax taken out of your pay each pay period. So if you wish to claim 1 for yourself instead, then less is taken out each pay period, so you get more, but you always want to make sure that you have enough taken out. What does exempt mean, where you see exemption from withholding? Well, exempt means to be free from tax. So to be exempt from withholding, both of the following have to be true. You owed no federal income tax in the prior tax year, and you expect not to owe any federal income tax in the current tax year. So that's a very specific scenario when someone would be exempt from any withholding. Now, what do allowances mean? An allowance directly affects the amount of taxes which your employer will withhold from your paycheck, just like it did with the federal forms. So for example, claiming 1 allowance means that having that allowance will lower the amount of income tax taken out of your paycheck relative to if you said 0 allowances, where you would have the most tax taken out. So you end up with more being withheld and sent over to the government. Now, allowances matter. If you don't claim enough of them and you have too much money sent to the IRS, you'll end up with a tax refund. So that's what you might hear about, or you might have already, done this or seen your parents do this. That's when at the end of the year, the government, the IRS, and California's EDD, they say, well, how much did you owe us? How much did you pay us? And if you paid more than you owed, they simply give it back to you after you file your tax return. If you didn't pay enough, then you'll actually owe money. And if you, for instance, claimed too many allowances, didn't have enough taxes withheld, and now when they say, how much did you owe? How much did we get from you withholding? If you didn't have enough withheld and you owe, you possibly will have to pay a penalty for paying too little taxes. That's why you always want to make sure you have at least enough withheld. And then again, exemptions in this case, exempt means to be free from tax. So to be exempt from withholding, again, both of the following have to be true. You owed no federal income tax in the prior tax year, and you expect to owe no federal income tax in the current year. You might wonder, why are we looking at, or why are we thinking about federal tax again, even though we're working on California's form? Well, a lot of times the states will base their rules on the federal rules. So if you're exempt from federal taxes is when an exemption would also be allowable for this California form. All right, so what will be taken out of your paycheck? So this is something that can be surprising if you've not received a paycheck and talked through this before, but we're going to walk through it so that you completely understand and it's not a surprise what you can expect. So 2 important terms to remember are gross pay and net pay. Gross pay is the full amount of your salary before deductions, withholdings, or any contributions are taken out. So that's like the top of the line. Now, net pay is your actual take home, or the amount you receive after these items have been subtracted from your gross pay. So that's what you would see in your paycheck or in your direct deposit that you actually get, is the net pay. So how do you go from one to the other? Well, deductions and withholdings are subtracted from the gross pay before your paycheck is paid. Withholdings are the amounts that are taken out of your paycheck to pay your income taxes for that pay period. Deductions, when applicable, are amounts that are taken out for benefits and donations you might have chosen. So some benefits such as retirement, where you're having money deducted so that you can put it into future money that you can tap into when you're retired. It could be for healthcare benefits, or it could be for other special funds. So most tax withholdings are determined by law, and your employer is actually required, it's not optional, they're required to withhold the required amounts and submit a summary to you. Deductions, on the other hand, tend to be voluntary, and they're determined by the worker's choice of, let's say, their healthcare plan or the percentage that they want deducted for their retirement plan. In the United States, federal and state income taxes are withheld from all employee paychecks. And the amount withheld is determined by the number of exemptions that an employee enters in their either W-4 form or their CA EDD DE-4 form when the employee is hired. You need to understand that the money withheld is being sent to the government, so it's either the IRS or the state, on your behalf. So if too much is withheld, like I said, at the end of the year, when they say this is what you owed, this is what you had withheld, so this is what you sent to us. If it's more than what you owed, then you'll receive a refund after filing your tax return. If you haven't paid enough, then you'll need to pay the difference when you file your tax return. Now, you can adjust your tax withholding at any time if you feel like you're taking too much or too little in taxes being withheld, or if your life circumstance changes. For instance, if you had a child or if you were to get married, those would be times that you might want to revisit that tax calculator and make sure that the exemptions that you're having withheld will end up being what you need. So here are a few of the contributions which most people see on their pay stub. So these are those withholdings that might look a little surprising when you're like, what is this? Where did my money go? This will help you demystify what you're looking at. So Social Security, the employer and you as the employee each pay 6.2% in a Social Security tax. So that's a total of 12.4% contributed in the employee's name. So you're both paying and the employer is matching what you're paying for Social Security, which is a benefit that you'll receive much later in life, but we have to fund that. So one way we do that is by paying taxes now for future benefits. The next item is Medicare. So you contribute another 1.45% to the employee's Medicare tax, the employee share, and your employer also contributes 1.45% for a combined 2.9%, all sent in the employee's name. And so this total amount of Social Security plus Medicare of 15.30% is split exactly 50-50 between what the employer, so what the company is paying for you, and what you're having taken out of your pay for you. Next is the federal unemployment tax. And so this is a required benefit that's 100% employer paid. So this is something that you won't see reduce the amount of your salary or your hourly rate, but it is something that's paid on your behalf. And there are other contributions that might include a state unemployment or a local tax if you live in a city. For instance, San Francisco has local taxes, then this is where you might see a few other contributions specified. Now, I know that was a lot, but in general, to recap, gross pay is that number. Let's say your job is paying $15 an hour and you work 10 hours. That $150 that you made that week would be your gross pay. And then when you see the amounts that have been taken out for Social Security, for Medicare, for federal unemployment, well, for any other federal or state or local taxes, federal income tax, for instance, those are going to be withholdings that get paid directly to the government agencies. And then if you had any additional deductions, such as an amount for retirement, an amount for healthcare, those are all the things that you're going to see that go from your gross pay to when you get down to your net pay. So your paycheck might be for $150, but after those withholdings, after those deductions, your total might be $100. And this is just a reminder of what each of those deductions and withholdings are representing. Now, let's think about questions. One very popular question is, will you need to file a tax return? Well, if you're wondering if you have to file a tax return, many students, but not all, many students don't need to file a tax return themselves, since they tend to be claimed as dependents on their parents' return. Now, however, if you did make over $600 in one calendar year, or if you had taxes withheld from your paycheck, you should certainly file a return so that you can get that money back. The money that was withheld, as I mentioned on the previous slide, the money that might have been withheld for federal income tax or state income tax. If you don't file a return, then the government won't have that opportunity to say, here's how much you owed, here's how much you paid us more, we'll give it back. If you never send in that return, they won't do that exercise. Now, if you are claimed by your parents as a dependent, then make sure to tell your tax preparer, or if you do it yourself on TurboTax, make sure that that is clearly communicated, because your tax preparer, or if you're using a tax service, it's very important that they know this information on your return so there aren't any mistakes. If you want to see if you'll get a refund, then you can always use one of the online free file options that are available. So if you visit the IRS website for a free online option near you, then you can just go to the IRS's website. So that's just irs.gov/app/free file. Or if you simply Google free file, just make sure you go to a URL that has irs.gov as the domain, so you know it's the legitimate website. You don't want irs.com, you don't want irsgov.com, you want irs.gov in the URL. And free file shows all of the programs. It'll show TurboTax and H&R Block and many others, but you can certainly see if you'll get a refund using one of those free options. Well, what are you going to do if after this presentation you've been like, Marty, you did all this talking and I still have questions? Well, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm just one of many. We've got a very excited team to help you take this next step in your career and in your professional journey. So if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to email us at admin@taxaid.org, our website, as I mentioned earlier, taxaid.org, or feel free to give us a call. We've got team members standing by, excited to take your call. 415-229-9240. And so in closing, one thing that I'll say is nobody's born knowing how taxes work. Nobody is an expert just because they decided to be an expert. So if you feel a little overwhelmed, if you feel a bit uncomfortable, reminder of that slide to not panic and just know that someone had to teach all of us this. So hopefully I made a small impact on helping you to understand and be a little more comfortable with taxes, but we've got plenty of resources, as I mentioned, to make sure that you feel as comfortable as we hope you do. So excited for this opportunity for you, and so happy to be able to work with this awesome program. You all take care, and I'll see or speak to you soon.